Ethan Ward woke at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before his alarm. He always did. It was a habit carved from necessity, from the years of waking before grief could catch him in those vulnerable first moments of consciousness. The apartment was small but clean. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that doubled as a dining room. The walls held no photographs from before, only Milo's drawings, taped haphazardly with blue painter's tape that wouldn't damage the landlord's beige paint. He moved through the morning routine with practiced efficiency. Coffee first, black and bitter. Then Milo's lunch, peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, the granola bars that were on sale last week. He packed it into the Spider-Man lunchbox that was already wearing thin at the corners but that Milo loved too much to replace. "Dad?" Milo's voice came from the doorway, small and sleep-rough. "Morning, buddy." Ethan turned, forcing brightness into his tone. "Ready for the spelling test today?" Milo nodded, shuffling to the table in his astronaut pajamas. At 7 years old, he had his mother's eyes, dark and intelligent, and capable of seeing through any lie Ethan tried to tell. It made being strong harder. It made being strong necessary. They ate cereal together in comfortable silence. Outside, Summit Ridge was waking up. Ethan could hear the garbage truck making its rounds, the distant bark of the Hendersons' dog 3 floors down, the city stirring itself toward another Tuesday. He'd lived in Summit Ridge for 3 years now. After the accident, after the funeral, after the suffocating sympathy of their old neighborhood in Portland, he'd packed everything that mattered into a U-Haul and driven south until he found a place that didn't remember him. Summit Ridge was perfect in its indifference. A mid-sized city with a historic downtown, suburban sprawl at the edges, and just enough anonymity for a man who wanted to disappear. Ethan worked maintenance at the Riverside office complex now, fixing leaky faucets, replacing burnt-out ballasts, patching drywall. Work that required his hands but not his heart. Work that paid enough to keep them fed and housed, but not enough to feel like progress. He did side jobs, 2 handyman requests, through a local app, weekend projects for neighbors who paid cash. It was a good life, he told himself. Quiet. Safe. Nothing like the life he'd had before. Before, when he was Ethan Ward, architect. When he'd won the Northwest Emerging Designer Award at 29. When he'd been married to Julia, and they'd talked about building their dream home in the mountains, and she'd laughed at all his terrible jokes, and she'd been alive. 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 "Dad, you're squeezing the spoon too hard." Ethan blinked, looked down. His knuckles were white around the handle. "Sorry, buddy. Just thinking." "About Mom?" The question was gentle. Milo asked it sometimes. Not with sadness, but with curiosity, as if trying to understand the shape of the hole in their family. "Yeah, about Mom." Milo reached across the table and patted Ethan's hand. The gesture was so adult, so careful, that Ethan's throat closed up. "It's okay to think about her," Milo said seriously. "Mrs. Patterson says remembering people keeps them close." Mrs. Patterson was the school counselor. Ethan made a mental note to send her a thank you card. "Mrs. Patterson is very smart," Ethan managed. They finished breakfast. He drove Milo to Ridgeview Elementary. Watched him run toward his friends on the playground, backpack bouncing. Waited until Milo turned and waved their ritual before driving away. The day stretched ahead like every other day. Ethan stopped at Riverside, fixed a malfunctioning HVAC unit, replaced the bathroom fixtures in Suite 304. His supervisor, Gary, mentioned a possible promotion to senior maintenance tech. Better hours, slightly better pay. "Think about it," Gary said, clapping him on the shoulder. Ethan nodded, but felt nothing. Promotions belong to people with futures. He was just here, present tense, one day at a time. That evening, the weather report flickered across his phone screen. Severe storm warning for Summit Ridge. High winds expected. Possible power outages. Ethan made sure their flashlights had batteries. Double-checked that the windows were sealed. texted Milo's after-school care to confirm pickup before the weather hit. He stood at their apartment window as the sky darkened. The clouds moved fast, heavy and bruised-looking. In the distance, thunder rumbled like furniture, being dragged across heaven's floor. Something was coming. He didn't know it would change everything. The storm hit at 2 a.m., shrieking like something alive. Ethan lay awake, listening to rain hammer the windows. Wind howling through the complex's courtyard. Somewhere outside, a trash can clattered endlessly against concrete. He thought about getting up to check on Milo but heard his son's soft snoring through the thin wall. Kids could sleep through anything. It was a mercy. By morning, the storm had blown itself out, leaving Summit Ridge drenched and battered. Branches littered the streets. A traffic light at the corner hung uselessly from its cable. Ethan drove carefully to drop Milo at school, navigating around debris. "Whoa," Milo breathed, nose pressed to the window. "It looks like a monster came through. Just wind, buddy." Nature flexing its muscles. But Milo was right. There was something violent about the aftermath, something that felt personal. After drop-off, Ethan headed home to assess any damage to their building. The complex had weathered it well, just some missing shingles and a bent gutter. He was making notes for Gary when movement across the street caught his eye. The house directly opposite their complex was relatively new. Someone had bought it about 2 months ago. Ethan had noticed the moving trucks, but never the owner. It was a small craftsman-style home, charming in a neighborhood of aging apartment buildings. Whoever lived there valued privacy. The curtains were always drawn. Now, standing in the front yard, was a woman. She was young, late 20s, maybe with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a navy sweater, both expensive-looking in that subtle way Ethan remembered from his old life. But it was her posture that struck him, utterly still, arms crossed, staring at the section of fence that had collapsed during the night. The fence had been beautiful once. Custom-built, wooden, with an intricate lattice top. Now about 15 feet of it lay in splinters across her yard and part of the sidewalk. Ethan watched her for a moment. She didn't move. Didn't pull out a phone to call someone. Just stood there, looking at the destruction with an expression he couldn't quite read. Frustration? Calculation? He should go inside. It wasn't his problem, but his feet were already carrying him across the street. "Excuse me," he called out as he approached. "Are you all right?" She turned, and Ethan got his first clear look at her face. Striking, not in a conventional way, but in the way of someone who'd learned to control every micro-expression. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was measured. Professional. Just assessing the damage. Ethan looked at the fence. "That's going to be expensive to replace." "Do you have insurance?" "I have everything." There was no arrogance in the statement, just fact. "But the company I usually use is booked out for weeks." Storm damage across the whole city. He stepped closer, crouching to examine the wreckage. The wood had been good quality, properly treated. The collapse was due to a structural weakness at the posts. They'd been set too shallow, probably by whoever installed it originally. The storm had just exploited the flaw. "The posts weren't sunk deep enough," Ethan said, running his hand along a splintered section. "Whoever built this originally cut corners. Should have gone at least 30 inches down in this soil type, maybe 36 with concrete footing." He felt her attention sharpen. "You know construction." It wasn't a question. Ethan stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "I know enough. I could fix this for you, if you want. Properly this time. I'd need to rent a post-hole digger, get new lumber. But I could have it done in 2 days." "Why would you do that?" The question caught him off guard. "Because it needs fixing?" For the first time, something that might have been a smile touched her mouth. Most people would walk past. Most people aren't. He stopped himself. Wasn't what? Desperate for distraction? Haunted by the need to fix things because he couldn't fix the only thing that mattered? "I have time," he finished simply, "and you need help." She studied him for a long moment. Ethan had the unsettling feeling of being read, cataloged, filed away in some mental database. "All right," she said finally. "Give me an estimate. Materials and labor." They walked the fence line together. Ethan took measurements, made notes on his phone, calculated footage and hardware requirements. It felt strange and familiar at the same time, his brain slipping into the old patterns of spatial reasoning, structural analysis, problem solving. This was just a fence, nothing like the buildings he used to dream up, but the fundamental principles were the same. He was aware of her beside him, silent but present, watching everything he did. "I can source the materials today," Ethan said when he'd finished. "Start tomorrow morning, have it done by Thursday evening. I'd charge you $1,200 for everything that's materials, equipment rental, and labor. That's extremely reasonable. It's fair. Fairness and reasonability aren't the same thing." She pulled out her phone, tapped something. "What's your payment app?" They exchanged information. The money appeared in his account immediately, not $1,200, but $15. "You added contingency," she interrupted. "In case you run into complications, keep whatever's left." Ethan wanted to argue but recognized the futility. She had the air of someone who didn't waste time on arguments she'd already decided. "I'll see you tomorrow morning then," he said. "Around 8? I'll be here." She turned to walk back to her house, then paused, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a business card. "In case you need to reach me," she said, holding it out. Their fingers brushed as he took it. Her hand was cool, steady. "Thank you, miss?" "Hale," she said. "Sienna Hale." Then she was gone, disappearing into her house with that same controlled grace. Ethan looked down at the card. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. Simple and elegant. Sienna Hale, Chief Executive Officer. Hale Dominion. Below that, a phone number and email address. Nothing else. The name meant nothing to him. He pocketed the card and headed home to order lumber. It was only that evening, after Milo was asleep, that curiosity got the better of him. He typed Hale Dominion Summit Ridge into Google. The results made his stomach drop. Hale Dominion wasn't just a company. It was the company in Summit Ridge. Ethan sat on his worn couch, laptop balanced on his knees, clicking through article after article with growing disbelief. Hale Dominion acquires. Historic Riverside District plans mixed-use development. Summit Ridge's youngest female CEO transforms downtown. Sienna Hale, the woman who owns Summit Ridge. That last headline was hyperbolic, but not by much. According to the Business Journal article beneath it, Hale Dominion owned or had controlling interest in approximately 60% of the commercial real estate in Summit Ridge's downtown core. The company had been founded by Sienna's father, Richard Hale, 30 years ago. When he died 4 years ago, Sienna, then just 24, had taken over. The articles painted a picture of someone ruthlessly competent. She'd restructured the company, modernized its holdings, turned 3 historic buildings into revenue generators while maintaining their architectural integrity. Under her leadership, Hale Dominion had expanded from real estate into property management, urban development consulting, and sustainable renovation projects. There were photos. Sienna in a black suit, at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Sienna shaking hands with the mayor. Sienna standing in front of a restored Art Deco building, arms crossed, that same unreadable expression on her face. She looked different in the professional photos, harder, more distant. But the bone structure was unmistakable. That was the woman who'd stood in her yard this morning, looking at a broken fence. The woman Ethan had offered to do handyman work for. The woman who owned the building where he worked. Because yes, he'd clicked deeper and discovered that Riverside Office Complex was a Hale Dominion property. Had been for 6 years. His landlord's landlord was Sienna Hale. Ethan closed the laptop and sat in the dark living room, feeling untethered. What was someone like her doing living in a modest craftsman home across from a working-class apartment complex? Why hadn't she just hired one of the dozen high-end contractors that probably jumped when she called? Why had she let him maintenance guy with drywall dust under his fingernails measure her fence? He thought about the way she'd watched him work. Not skeptical. Not dismissive. Analytical. like she was measuring him against some internal standard. He couldn't see. It made him deeply uncomfortable. He thought about canceling, making up an excuse. But he'd already taken her money, and more than that, he'd given his word. Ethan Ward didn't break his word. It was one of the few things he had left from the person he used to be. So the next morning, he rented the post hole digger, picked up the lumber he'd ordered, and drove to Sienna's house with his toolbox rattling in the truck bed. She answered the door before he could knock. "Good morning." She'd traded the sweater for a white button-down and black pants. Work clothes. But she clearly wasn't going to work. "Coffee? I'm fine, thank you. I made extra." It wasn't quite an order, but close. "Come in for a minute." Her home's interior was a surprise. Ethan had expected minimalism, cold modern lines. Instead, the space was warm hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves crammed with actual books, comfortable furniture that looked used, art on the walls, but not the expensive abstract pieces he'd imagined. Landscapes, local artists by the look of them. The kitchen was sunlit and smelled like fresh coffee and something baking. "I don't usually have contractors in the house," Sienna said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs without asking if he wanted it. "But we should establish parameters, timeline, access, that sort of thing." "Sure." Ethan accepted the mug, noticed his hands looked rough and scarred against the clean ceramic. "You said 2 days. Is that a firm timeline?" "Barring complications, yes." "I'll work until dark today. Finish tomorrow morning. And the old fence material? I'll haul it away, dispose of it properly." "Good." She sipped her coffee, watching him over the rim. "Can I ask you something?" "Okay. What did you do before maintenance work?" The question landed like a punch. Ethan's fingers tightened on the mug. "Why would you think I did something else? The way you assessed the fence. You didn't just see what was broken, you saw why it failed." "That's not handyman thinking. That's engineering thinking." She was too perceptive. Ethan considered lying, then decided it didn't matter. This was just a fence. After today, he'd probably never see her again. "I was an architect," he said quietly. "Why did you stop?" "Personal reasons." Most people would have pressed. Sienna just nodded, as if his evasion had told her everything she needed to know. "Thank you for the coffee," Ethan said, setting down the half-full mug. "I should start work." Of course. He escaped to the yard, to the familiar comfort of physical labor, marking post locations, drilling holes, setting concrete. The work was straightforward, meditative. His body knew what to do. Freeing his mind to drift, he tried not to think about the fact that Sienna stayed home that day, that she sat on her back porch with her laptop, presumably working, but glanced up frequently to watch him work. He tried not to wonder what she saw. By Wednesday evening, the fence stood complete. Better than before, Ethan had reinforced the posts, added proper drainage, treated the wood with a higher-grade sealant. It would last 20 years easily. He was loading the last of his tools when Sienna came out. She walked the fence line slowly, running her hand along the rails, testing the stability of each section. "It's beautiful," she said finally. "Better than the original. Should be. I corrected the structural flaws. I can see that." She turned to face him. "Ethan, I'd like to hire you for another project. I'm not really taking on new. Hear me out first." She pulled out her phone, tapped it, handed it to him. The screen showed architectural renderings of a building Ethan recognized immediately. The Phoenix Tower, a historic 12-story Art Deco structure in downtown Summit Ridge. He'd admired it from the outside several times. It had been vacant for years, slowly deteriorating. "Hale Dominion purchased Phoenix Tower 8 months ago," Sienna said. "We're planning a full restoration, converting it to mixed-use retail on the ground floor, offices above, residential units on the top 3 floors. I want it to be a showcase project. Historically accurate, but modernized. Sustainable. That's ambitious. Yes, you have architects for this though. A whole team probably. I have architects who are very good at what they do, but they're seeing it as a project, a problem to solve. She took the phone back. I need someone who sees buildings the way you see them, as living things, as something that can fail or flourish, depending on how well they're understood. Ethan's chest felt tight. You're basing that on a fence. I'm basing it on the way you diagnosed that fence's problems in under 30 seconds. On the fact that you didn't just fix what was broken, you anticipated future stress points and reinforced them. That's not handyman work, Ethan. That's architecture. I told you, I don't do that anymore. Why not? The question was gentle but relentless. Because I can't, Ethan said, and his voice came out harder than he intended. Because that part of my life is over. Why? Because my wife died. The words burst out. Because I was supposed to meet her at the site for a project consultation, but I was running late, and she was waiting in her car, and a semi-truck crossed the median, and he stopped. Breathed. I wasn't there. I was late because I was obsessing over a design detail that didn't matter. And she died alone in a parking lot, waiting for me. The silence stretched. Ethan wanted to leave, to run, but his legs felt like concrete. I'm sorry, Sienna said quietly. That's not a wound that heals. No, but you're still an architect. That doesn't go away. It has to. I can't. He struggled for words. Every time I think about design, about buildings, I see her waiting. I see that parking lot. I can't separate them. So you buried it. Took a job that uses your hands but not your vision. Yes. And is it working? The question caught him off guard. He wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that the last 3 years of careful, contained living had achieved something. But standing in Sienna's yard, with a completed fence behind him and the ghost of his old self whispering in his ear, he couldn't. I don't know, he admitted. Sienna nodded slowly. I'm not asking you to lead the project. Just consult. Technical advisor. Come look at the building. Give your professional opinion on the restoration approach. A few hours of your time. I'll pay you $2,000 for the consultation. $2,000. That was half his monthly salary. Why? Ethan asked. Why me? You don't know anything about my work history, my qualifications. I know you won the Northwest Emerging Designer Award 6 years ago. I know your firm was Anderson and Ward. That you specialized in adaptive reuse projects. I know you walked away after your wife died and haven't taken on an architectural project since. Ethan stared at her. You researched me. Of course I did. I research everyone I do business with. This is a fence. That's not business. Everything is business, Sienna said. But this isn't about business. This is about the fact that I watched you work for 2 days, and I saw someone who understands buildings the way most people never will. Phoenix Tower deserves that understanding. And you deserve a chance to remember who you were. You don't know me. No, she agreed. But I know what it's like to walk away from yourself, and I know what it costs to try to go back. There was something in her voice, a crack in the professional armor. Ethan realized he wasn't the only one carrying ghosts. Just come see the building, Sienna said. Friday afternoon, 2 hours. If you hate it, you walk away with $2,000, and I never contact you again. Ethan thought about Milo, about the school's upcoming science camp that cost $300, about the fact that their car needed new tires, about the way his son sometimes looked at him with worried eyes, as if afraid Ethan might break. Okay, he heard himself say. Friday. Sienna's expression didn't change, but something in her posture relaxed fractionally. Thank you. I'll send you the details. Ethan finished packing his tools in silence, hyper-aware of her presence. When he finally drove away, he checked his rear-view mirror and saw her still standing there, watching his truck disappear down the street. That night, after Milo was asleep, Ethan opened the storage closet at the back of his bedroom. Inside were 3 boxes he hadn't touched in 3 years. His hand hovered over the tape sealing the top box. Inside were his old portfolio books, his sketches, awards, the professional self he'd buried. He pulled his hand back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Friday afternoon arrived too quickly. Ethan had spent the intervening days oscillating between determination to back out and curiosity about Phoenix Tower. The building had been beautiful once he remembered seeing photos in architectural journals, back when he read those. But decay was cruel to beautiful things. He picked up Milo from school first, explaining that he had a quick work meeting. "Can I come?" Milo asked, hopefully. "Not this time, buddy. I'm dropping you at the Costellos for a couple hours. Dylan's mom said you guys can play the new video game. The space one? That's the one." Milo cheered, and Ethan felt the familiar guilt of buying his son's cooperation with treats. But Dylan's mother, Karen, was kind and never made Ethan feel like he was imposing, even though he probably was. By 2:30, he was parking in front of Phoenix Tower. The building looked worse up close. Scaffolding partially covered the facade. Some windows were boarded up, others broken. Graffiti tagged the ground floor. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, with warning signs about unstable structure. Sienna stood by the entrance, talking to a man in a hard hat. She'd traded her casual clothes for a charcoal suit that made her look every inch the CEO. When she saw Ethan, she said something to the man and walked over. "You came. I said I would. Not everyone does what they say." She handed him a hard hat and a clipboard. "Basic liability waiver. Site's safe enough for supervised access. But we need the formality." Ethan signed without reading. They went inside. The ground floor was a hollow shell stripped to the studs, debris everywhere, pigeons roosting in the rafters. But underneath the destruction, the bones of the building were magnificent. Art Deco details still visible in the plasterwork. The ghost of a geometric floor pattern. Soaring ceilings with hints of their original grandeur. Something in Ethan's chest cracked open. "Original blueprints are in the site trailer," Sienna said, watching him. "But the drawings are incomplete. Lot of modifications over the years, not all documented." Ethan barely heard her. He was walking through the space, his trained eye automatically assessing load-bearing walls, window placements, ceiling heights. His fingers itched for a pencil, a sketch pad. His mind was already mapping possibilities. "The structural engineer's report says we need to reinforce the second-floor joists," Sienna continued, following him. "Replace most of the windows. Obviously new electrical, plumbing, HVAC. But the question is, how do we modernize without destroying what makes this building special? You preserve the shell, gut the interior," Ethan said, still moving. "Keep all the Art Deco elements, the plasterwork, the floor patterns, the window casings. Those are your anchors. Everything else serves them." That's what our lead architect proposed. But the energy efficiency numbers are poor, because he's thinking about it wrong. Ethan stopped, turned to face her. "You don't fight the building's natural characteristics. You work with them. These high ceilings? They're passive cooling. These large windows? Natural light. Reduced electricity costs. The thick walls? Thermal mass. This building was designed before cheap energy made us lazy. It has inherent sustainable features. You just have to unlock them." He was talking faster now, hands gesturing. "You add modern systems, yes. But you make them complement the existing structure. Geothermal for heating and cooling. Solar panels on the roof, hidden from street view to preserve the aesthetic. Smart glass in the new windows that maintains the original proportions. LED lighting that mimics the warmth of the original fixtures." Sienna was typing rapidly on her phone. "Keep going. The first floor should be retail, like you said, but not generic chain stores. Curated tenants that fit the building's character. Art galleries, a bookstore, a cafe with the original tilework exposed. You're not just renting space, you're creating a destination." "And the offices?" Ethan closed his eyes, seeing it. "Open plan, but with private areas. Glass partitions to maintain sight lines. The original columns become features, not obstacles. Co-working spaces on floors 3 and 4 for startups, boutique firms. You want tenants who appreciate the space, who'll treat it as more than just square footage. The residential units? Top 3 floors. High ceilings, original details, modern amenities hidden behind period-appropriate facades. These aren't apartments. They're homes for people who understand quality. Price them accordingly. He opened his eyes and found Sienna staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "What?" he asked. "You've just described exactly what I wanted for this building, but couldn't articulate." She looked down at her phone. "And you did it in 5 minutes. It's just conceptual. The details, would you work those out? Not as a consultant, as the project architect." Ethan's stomach dropped. "I told you. I know what you told me. I'm telling you that you just proved you're still an architect whether you want to be or not. That doesn't go away, Ethan. It's who you are. I can't or won't. Does it matter? Yes." She stepped closer. "Because can't means there's an obstacle. Won't means you're choosing to give up. I'm not giving up. I'm accepting reality." "What reality? That your wife died and so you have to bury your talent. You think that honors her?" The words hit like a slap. Ethan's vision went red at the edges. "You don't know anything about honoring her. You didn't know her. Don't pretend." "You're right," Sienna interrupted, voice cutting through his anger. "I didn't know her. But I knew my father. And when my mother died, he stopped being who he was. Stopped designing, stopped creating. Said it hurt too much. And you know what happened? He got smaller every year. Sadder. Until there was almost nothing left of the man he'd been. And then he died too, and I was left wondering if he'd have lived longer, lived better, if he'd just kept doing what he loved." Her voice had gone rough. She took a breath, smoothed her expression back to professional calm. "I'm not saying your grief isn't valid, or that architecture will fix it. I'm saying that you're allowed to still be yourself, even though she's gone. That's not betrayal. That's survival." Ethan couldn't speak. His throat felt full of broken glass. "Think about it," Sienna said quietly. "The offer is open. Project architect. Full salary, benefits. You can work whatever hours you need around your son. I'll send the formal proposal this evening." She turned and walked away, heels clicking on concrete. At the door, she paused. "For what it's worth, I think your wife would want you to keep building things." Then she was gone. Ethan stood alone in the ruined lobby of Phoenix Tower, surrounded by decay and possibility, and tried to remember how to breathe. The formal proposal arrived at 7 p.m. Ethan opened it on his phone, while Milo did homework at the kitchen table. Salary: $95,000 annually. Health insurance. Flexible hours. Start date: negotiable. Project duration: 18 months. It was more money than he'd made in 3 years combined. He closed the email without responding. "Dad, how do you spell ecosystem?" Ethan spelled it automatically. Mind elsewhere. He kept seeing Phoenix Tower. Kept feeling that crack in his chest that had opened when he walked through the lobby. It had felt like a door he'd boarded shut suddenly swinging open, letting in light he'd forgotten existed. It terrified him. That night, he dreamed about Julia. They were at the Portland project site, the one where she died. But in the dream, she was alive, laughing at something he'd said, sun catching in her dark hair. Then she was getting into her car. And Ethan was running, trying to reach her, to stop her. But his legs moved through molasses. He watched the semi-truck cross the median in slow motion, unable to scream, unable to save her. He woke at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, Milo standing by his bed. "You were yelling," Milo whispered. "Sorry, buddy. Bad dream. I'm okay." "About Mom?" "Yeah." Milo climbed into bed with him, something he hadn't done in months. They lay together in the dark, and Ethan thought about Sienna's father. About a man who'd let grief make him smaller until he disappeared. "Dad?" Milo's voice was very small. "Do you think Mom would be mad that we're happy sometimes?" The question broke something in Ethan. No, buddy, not at all. She'd want us to be happy. But you're not. Not really. Ethan had no answer to that. By Monday, he'd almost convinced himself to respond to Sienna's email with a polite refusal. But Monday brought its own crisis. The school nurse called at 10:30 a.m. Milo had a fever of 101 and was complaining of chest pain. Could Ethan come get him? He left work immediately, guilt and fear churning in equal measure. By the time he got Milo to the pediatrician, the fever had climbed to 103. The doctor listened to his chest and frowned. I'm hearing some congestion. We should do a chest x-ray. Rule out pneumonia. Pneumonia. The word crashed through Ethan like thunder. The next 6 hours were a blur. Emergency room. X-rays. Waiting. Milo's small hand in his. Burning with fever. The doctor finally emerging to say it was early pneumonia. They wanted to admit him overnight for IV antibiotics. By evening, Milo was hooked to machines in a pediatric ward, sleeping fitfully. Ethan sat in the chair beside the bed, watching his son breathe, and felt the familiar terror that had lived in him since Julia died. The certainty that everything good would be taken away, that he couldn't protect the people he loved. His phone buzzed. Multiple messages from Gary, asking about work tomorrow. A text from Karen Costello, asking if Milo was okay. And an email from Sienna. Ethan, I've scheduled a full board presentation for Wednesday at 2 p.m. I need you there to present your vision for Phoenix Tower. This is essential. Please confirm. S.H. Ethan stared at the email. Wednesday was 2 days away. His son was in a hospital bed. The project team probably expected polished presentations, detailed drawings, cost analyses. He couldn't do it. Couldn't be in two places. Couldn't split himself between who he used to be and who he needed to be now. He began typing a response. I can't. I'm sorry. My son. Milo stirred, coughed weakly. A nurse came in to check vitals. Ethan deleted the message. He'd tell Sienna tomorrow. After Milo was released. After he knew his son was okay. If his son was okay, Ethan put his head in his hands and tried not to fall apart. Milo improved rapidly. Children's resilience was miraculous. By Wednesday morning, the fever had broken and the doctor was talking about discharge. But they wanted to keep him until late afternoon for one more round of IV antibiotics. You should go to work, Dad, Milo said, sounding more like himself. I'm fine. Mrs. Costello said she'd come sit with me. Karen had indeed offered, multiple times. Still, Ethan hesitated. I don't want to leave you. I'm not a baby. And you said you had an important meeting. He'd mentioned Sienna's project in passing, trying to explain why he'd been distracted. Milo, perceptive as always, had intuited its significance. It's not more important than you. I know. But Mom wouldn't want you to give up something important because of me. Milo said it matter-of-factly, with the simple wisdom of children. She'd want you to do both. That's what you always tell me, right? That we can miss her and still do things? Ethan felt his eyes burn. When did you get so smart? I'm 7 3/4. That's almost 8. Karen arrived at 11 with coloring books and a card game. Ethan kissed Milo's forehead, promised to be back by 5, and drove to Hale Dominion's office building. He was unprepared. The lobby was glass and steel and intimidation. A directory board listed 30 companies. Hale Dominion occupied the top 3 floors. Ethan rode the elevator up, acutely aware of his worn jacket, and the fact that he'd been wearing the same clothes since yesterday. Sienna met him at reception. She wore a black suit that probably cost more than his car payment. Her expression flickered when she saw him: surprise, concern, something else. You came, she said quietly. I can't stay long. My son. I heard. Is he all right? Of course she'd heard. She probably knew everything. He's improving. But I don't have a presentation. I don't have anything prepared. That's fine. Come with me. She led him down a hallway to a conference room. Inside, 6 people waited around a polished table. Sienna introduced them. Derek Vaughn, CFO, a thin man with cold eyes. Marla Pierce, COO, middle-aged and sharp-looking. The lead architect, Thomas Reed, who looked skeptical. Others whose names Ethan immediately forgot. On the wall, architectural renderings of Phoenix Tower, generic, soulless, nothing like the building deserved. "Ethan, why don't you tell us what you told me?" Sienna said, taking a seat at the head of the table. He stood there, exhausted and unprepared, and looked at the faces around the table. They expected him to fail. He could see it. The maintenance guy who thought he could play architect. Maybe they were right. Then he thought about Milo in that hospital bed, telling him to do both, to grieve and to live, to remember and to move forward. "These renderings are wrong," Ethan said. Derek's eyebrows rose. Thomas Reed's face went tight. "Excuse me?" Reed said coldly. "They're technically correct, but spiritually wrong. Phoenix Tower isn't a blank canvas. It's a historic building with its own voice. These plans treat it like any other structure. They're erasing what makes it special." "Mr. Ward," Derek interrupted. "Thomas has 20 years of experience. Then he should know better." Ethan moved to the renderings, pointing. "Look at these windows. They're the wrong proportion. The originals were taller, narrower, Art Deco. These are contemporary rectangles. And the ground floor, why are you lowering the ceiling? The height is the point. It makes you feel small in a good way, like you're entering a cathedral." "The height is inefficient," Reed said stiffly. "It's character. You can't quantify that in square footage. Can you quantify anything?" Derek asked. "Or is this all aesthetic feeling?" Ethan turned to him. "I can quantify that your current HVAC plan will cost 30% more to operate than necessary. That your lighting design will require replacement in 7 years instead of 20. That your window specifications will fail thermal performance tests in Summit Ridge's climate." "Should I continue?" The room went silent. "You don't have documentation for any of this," Marla said carefully. "No. I've had my son in the hospital. But I know buildings. And I know this building deserves better than what you're proposing." "This is ridiculous," Reed said, standing. "Sienna, you brought in an amateur to critique my work. Sit down, Thomas." Sienna's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Ethan, can you prepare a full presentation? Drawings, cost analysis, everything the board needs to make an informed decision?" "When?" "Friday, 2 days." It was impossible. Would require all-nighters, software he hadn't touched in years. Research, calculations. And Milo still needed him. "Yes," Ethan heard himself say. "Then this meeting is adjourned," Sienna said, standing. "We'll reconvene Friday at 10 a.m. Ethan will present his alternative vision. The board will vote on which approach to pursue." As everyone filed out, Derek paused by Ethan. "You just made this personal," he said quietly. "Thomas has allies on the board. You're going to fail. And you're going to embarrass Sienna in the process." "Maybe," Ethan said. "But at least I'll fail trying to do something right." Derek smiled coldly. "Principles don't pay bills." When the room cleared, Sienna approached. "You didn't have to defend me," Ethan said. "Yes, I did. You're right. Thomas's plan is safe, acceptable, and soulless. I knew it. But I didn't know how to articulate why." She paused. "Can you really pull together a presentation in 2 days?" "I don't know. Maybe. If Milo stays healthy. If I don't sleep, you need help. Resources. I'll give you access to our archives, our software, whatever you need." "Why are you doing this?" "Because Phoenix Tower matters." And because she hesitated, and for the first time, Ethan saw uncertainty in her expression. "Because I'm tired of playing it safe, of choosing the acceptable over the excellent. My father built this company on vision. After he died, I maintained it, made it profitable, stable, respectable. But I haven't built anything new, haven't risked anything, and that's not what he would have wanted. She met Ethan's eyes. You're not the only one who stopped being yourself after someone died. The honesty in her voice was startling. Friday then, Ethan said. Friday. He made it back to the hospital by 4:30. Milo was being discharged, animated and chattering. Karen had stayed the whole time. That night, after Milo was asleep, Ethan opened those boxes in his closet, pulled out his portfolio books, his old sketch pads, looked at the work he'd done when he believed in himself. Then he opened his laptop and started drawing. 2 days and nights blurred together. Ethan worked through Wednesday night, dozed for 3 hours, worked through Thursday. Sienna had been true to her word. He had access to everything. Historical records, structural reports, even a 3D laser scan of Phoenix Tower's current state. He built his presentation like he used to build projects, foundation first. Research the building's history. Understand its original purpose. Trace how it had been modified over decades. Then diagnose what was sound, what was damaged, what could be saved. Only then did he start designing. Milo, blessedly, seemed to understand. He did homework quietly, brought Ethan sandwiches, asked minimal questions. On Thursday evening, Karen took him for a sleepover at their house so Ethan could work uninterrupted. By Thursday midnight, the presentation existed. Renderings, floor plans, elevations, cost estimates, timeline, sustainability metrics. Everything the board needed. It was 2 a.m. when Sienna called. "You should be sleeping," she said. "So should you." Ethan's eyes felt like sandpaper. "I wanted to check in." "How's it going?" "I'm done." "Or as done as I'm going to be." Silence. Then, "Can I see it?" 20 minutes later, she was at his door. He'd texted his address without thinking twice. Let her into his small apartment without embarrassment. Some barriers had been crossed. She sat at his kitchen table with her laptop, and he walked her through the presentation, watched her face as the slides progressed. The historical context. The philosophy of adaptive reuse. The specific design interventions. The numbers that proved it could work. When he finished, she sat back. "Ethan, this is extraordinary. You think the board will approve it? I think Derek and Thomas will fight it tooth and nail. I think Marlo will worry about risk. I think you're going to have to defend every single choice." She looked at him. "Can you do that? In front of a room full of people who want you to fail? Honestly, I don't know." 3 days ago, I couldn't even think about architecture without he stopped, throat tight. Without what? Without feeling like I was betraying Julia. Like moving forward meant leaving her behind. And now, Ethan thought about that. About the 48 hours he'd spent immersed in design again. It had hurt, yes. Brought back memories of her sharp and painful. But it had also felt like breathing after years of holding his breath. I don't know if she'd approve of what I'm doing. But I think she'd understand why I need to. Sienna nodded slowly. My father used to say that buildings are conversations across time. What we build now will speak to people 100 years from now. What they built before speaks to us. She gestured at his laptop. This design? It's continuing that conversation. That matters more than playing it safe. Your father sounds like he was wise. He was. And stubborn. And impossible to work with. A sad smile touched her mouth. After my mother died, he stopped designing. Ran the business, but didn't create anything new. I was 16. I watched him hollow out. Started taking over company operations when I was 19, just because someone had to. When he died 4 years later, I inherited an empire I'd never wanted. Do you regret it? Every day. And never. She shook her head. The company needed me. Summit Ridge needed stable leadership, but sometimes I wonder who I'd have been if I'd had the chance to just be Sienna, instead of Richard Hale's daughter. You're still young. You could. Could what? Walk away from the thing my father spent his life building? I can't do that. But I can make sure it stands for something, that it creates beauty, not just profit. She met his eyes. That's why Phoenix Tower matters. It's my chance to build something that would make him proud. Not of what I maintained, but of what I created. The vulnerability in her voice made Ethan's chest ache. Then we'd better make sure tomorrow goes well, he said. She stood to leave, paused at the door. Ethan, thank you. For this. For trusting me enough to try. Thank you for seeing something in me I'd forgotten was there. After she left, Ethan sat in his quiet apartment and realized something had shifted. He was still afraid, still grieving. But he was also, for the first time in 3 years, curious about what came next. He slept for 4 hours and woke to his alarm feeling something like hope. Friday morning arrived cold and bright. Ethan dressed in the only suit he owned bought for Julia's funeral, worn twice since. It still fit but felt like costume. He picked up Milo from the Costelloses, dropped him at school with a longer than usual hug. You're going to do great, Dad, Milo said confidently. How do you know? Because you're nervous. You only get nervous when stuff matters. 7-year-old wisdom. Ethan arrived at Hale Dominion at 9:30. Sienna met him in the lobby, looking professional and completely composed. Ready? She asked. No. But let's do it anyway. The conference room was packed. The original board members were there, but also others investors, the project manager, the head of operations. At least 15 people, all watching him with varying degrees of skepticism. Ethan set up his laptop with shaking hands. Whenever you're ready, Sienna said from her seat at the head of the table. Ethan looked at the faces around the table, thought about Phoenix Tower standing empty and forgotten, thought about Milo in a hospital bed telling him to do both, thought about Julia, and the way she used to say his passion for buildings was the thing she loved most about him. He opened the presentation. Phoenix Tower was built in 1928, he began. The height of Art Deco optimism. It was designed as a statement that Summit Ridge was a city of the future. For 40 years, it thrived. Then economic shifts, changing tastes, suburban sprawl. The downtown declined. The tower declined with it. By 2010, it was vacant. Now we have a choice. We can treat it like any other development, maximize square footage, meet code minimums, prioritize profit. Or we can remember what it was built to be. A statement, a conversation with the future. He clicked to the next slide, the historical photos he'd found. Phoenix Tower in its glory days, lobby gleaming, people streaming through. This building wasn't just functional, it was beautiful. That beauty served a purpose. It told people who worked there that their labor mattered. Told visitors that Summit Ridge valued quality. Told everyone who saw it that humans could create lasting things. Another click, the current state photos. We've forgotten that. Stripped it down to ROI and occupancy rates. Thomas's proposal treats Phoenix Tower like a problem to solve. Efficient, acceptable, forgettable. He heard Thomas shift in his seat, but didn't look. I'm proposing something different. Not restoration-resurrection. We acknowledge what the building was. Adapt it for what we need now. But preserve its voice, its character, then the renderings. He'd worked all night to make them perfect. Not photorealistic corporate imagery, but something better drawings that showed both precision and soul. Technical skill combined with artistic vision. The board leaned forward. Ethan walked them through every detail. The facade restoration that would bring back the Art Deco ornament. The window specifications that matched original proportions while meeting modern performance standards. The ground floor retail that created a destination, not just storefronts. The office spaces that celebrated the building's bones instead of hiding them. The residential units with 14-foot ceilings and restored millwork. Then, the numbers. Derek's face tightened as Ethan presented construction costs, energy projections, expected rental rates, ROI timeline. Your approach costs 18% more upfront, Derek interrupted. How do you justify that? Long-term value. Lower operating costs due to passive design features. Premium rental rates because the building is unique, not generic. Cultural cachet that attracts businesses and residents willing to pay for quality. And intangible value, this becomes a landmark. A point of pride for Summit Ridge. You can't quantify that in a spreadsheet, but it matters. Intangibles don't pay mortgages, Derek said flatly. No. But they build legacies. Ethan met his eyes. Hale Dominion can be a company that maximizes short-term profit. Or it can be a company that shapes Summit Ridge's future. Not both. Marla spoke up. The timeline is aggressive. 21 months from approval to certificate of occupancy. Yes, but achievable with proper management. I've built in contingency, identified critical path items, coordinated with contractors who specialize in historic renovation. You've done all this in 2 days? Thomas asked, voice dripping skepticism. Yes. I don't believe it. Ethan pulled up his file metadata. Every document is time-stamped. You can verify. Silence. Any other questions? Sienna asked. More questions came about materials, contractors, permitting, phasing. Ethan answered them all, drawing on knowledge he'd thought forgotten. His hands stopped shaking. His voice grew stronger. This was who he used to be, who he could be again. After 90 minutes, Sienna called for a vote. All in favor of Thomas Reed's conventional approach? 3 hands. Derek, Thomas, one of the investors. All in favor of Ethan Ward's alternative proposal? The rest of the hands went up. Not unanimous, but decisive. Ethan felt his knees go weak. Motion carries, Sienna said, and her expression revealed nothing, but her eyes found his across the table. Phoenix Tower restoration will proceed under Mr. Ward's architectural direction. Thomas, you'll work with Ethan on implementation. Derek, prepare revised budgets. Meeting adjourned. As people filed out, several approached Ethan. Marla shook his hand. An investor asked for his card. Even Derek, face tight with displeasure, said, "Don't make me regret this." "I won't," Ethan promised. Finally, the room cleared except for Sienna. She walked over, and for a moment, they just stood there. "You did it," she said quietly. "We did it." "No. That was all you." She smiled, and it transformed her face. Made her look younger, lighter. "Welcome back, Ethan." He realized she was right. He was back. Not the person he'd been before, that Ethan was gone forever, but a new version. Someone who carried grief and joy, loss and possibility, memory and hope. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. That's what second chances are for." 6 months later, Phoenix Tower stood transformed. Not finished construction continued inside, but alive again. The scaffolding had come down, revealing the restored facade. The Art Deco ornament gleamed. At night, carefully designed lighting made the building glow against Summit Ridge's skyline. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, hard hat under his arm, looking up at his work. His phone buzzed. "Milo, Dad, Mrs. Chen said our class can do a field trip to your building. Can we?" Ethan smiled. Typed back. "Of course, buddy. I'll give you guys a special tour. Admiring your handiwork?" He turned. Sienna approached in her usual professional armor. But something had softened in her over these months. They'd worked together daily, fought over details, learned each other's standards and quirks. Had become something like friends, though neither had named it that. "It's strange," Ethan said, "seeing it exist outside my head." "Good strange?" "Yeah. Really good." She stood beside him, both of them looking up. Workers moved in the windows, electricians, HVAC techs. The plasterer Ethan had insisted on hiring for the detailed restoration work. "The mayor's office called," Sienna said. "They want to feature Phoenix Tower in the city's sustainability showcase. Give you an award. That's your award. Your company. Our company now." She glanced at him. The board approved my proposal yesterday. Effective January 1st, you'll be promoted to chief architect with equity stake. Assuming you accept, Ethan stared at her. Sienna, don't answer yet. Think about it. But you should know. I'm planning 3 more historic renovation projects in the next 2 years. They'll need an architect who understands what we're trying to do, who we're trying to be, which is a company that builds legacy, not just buildings. Her words from months ago, coming full circle. I'll think about it, Ethan said. But he already knew his answer. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their building rise. You know, Sienna said eventually, my father would have liked you. Would have liked this. I wish I could have met him. Me too. Though you two would have butted heads constantly. He was impossibly stubborn about his vision. Wonder where you got that from. She laughed, surprising him. Surprising herself, maybe. Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time, an email notification. The subject line made his breath catch. Application received. Architecture Scholarship Fund. He opened it. A young woman, 23, single mother of a toddler. Trying to finish her architecture degree after 3 years away caring for a sick parent. Writing, I used to think I'd never find my way back, but I saw your interview in Summit Ridge Monthly about second chances, about how grief doesn't have to be the end of everything. I want to try again. Ethan had established the scholarship fund 2 months ago, using his first bonus from Hale Dominion, for students whose education had been interrupted by life, by loss, by the reality that survival sometimes meant setting dreams aside. He'd received 47 applications. He was going to fund 12. Everything okay? Sienna asked, noting his expression. Yeah, just. Someone I can help. She nodded, understanding without explanation. That was the thing. About grief. It gave you eyes for other people's pain. Come on, she said. I want to show you something. She led him inside Phoenix Tower, through the construction chaos to the elevator bank. They rode to the 12th floor, the penthouse level, still under heavy renovation, but one unit was nearly complete. Sienna used her key to let them in. Ethan stepped inside and stopped breathing. It was perfect. Everything he'd envisioned, but somehow better in reality. The original millwork restored and gleaming. 14-foot ceilings with the original plaster details. Massive windows flooding the space with light. Modern kitchen hidden behind period-appropriate cabinetry. The synthesis of history and innovation he'd fought for. This one isn't for rent, Sienna said quietly. No? No, it's mine. I'm moving in when it's finished. Ethan looked at her in surprise. You're leaving your house? I'm keeping the house. But I want to live here too. In the thing we built. The statement we made. She walked to the window, looked out over Summit Ridge. I've spent 4 years maintaining my father's legacy. I think it's time I built my own. This is a good start. I think so. She turned back to him. There's a 2-bedroom unit on the 10th floor. Corner unit, southern exposure. I've been holding it off market. I thought maybe you and Milo might want it. If you're interested. Below market rent for employees. Ethan's first instinct was to refuse. To say he couldn't afford it. Couldn't accept preferential treatment. But he stopped himself. Looked around at this space they'd created together. Thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, barely surviving. Thought about who he was becoming. Can Milo see it first? Sienna smiled. Of course. They left Phoenix Tower together as dusk settled over Summit Ridge. The building's lights came on, warm and welcoming. Ethan paused on the sidewalk, pulled out his phone, took a picture, sent it to Milo. This is what Dad built. Pretty cool, right? The response came immediately. So cool, Mom would love it. Ethan's eyes stung, but he was smiling. Yeah, buddy, I think she would. 3 months later, Summit Ridge Monthly ran a cover story. The Phoenix Rises. How one building became a city's second chance. The article featured photos of the completed Phoenix Tower. Interviews with Sienna about sustainable urban development. Profiles of the businesses and residents moving in artists, startups, young families. But the centerpiece was an interview with Ethan. Standing in the restored lobby, looking up at the ceiling he'd brought back to life, the journalist asked, "What does this project mean to you?" Ethan thought about that, about all the honest answers he could give. About loss and resurrection, grief and growth, endings and beginnings. "It means," he said finally, "that beautiful things can survive. Even when they seem lost. Even when everyone's ready to give up on them, they can survive, and with the right care, the right vision, they can become beautiful again, different than before, maybe, but still themselves. Still worth fighting for." "Are we still talking about the building?" Ethan smiled. "What do you think?" The article ended with a photo taken by one of the construction workers. Ethan and Sienna standing in front of Phoenix Tower on opening day. Not posed, just talking. But captured in that moment was something rare, two people who'd found each other at exactly the right time, who'd helped each other remember who they were, who'd built something lasting from ruins. The caption read simply, "Architects of Renewal." On the day the article published, Ethan picked up Milo from their new apartment 10th floor, corner unit, southern exposure, and they walked to Phoenix Tower together. Milo's hand in his. "Dad?" Milo asked as they approached the building. "Yeah, buddy? I think Mom would be really proud of you." Ethan stopped. Knelt down, so they were eye to eye. "You know what? I think you're right, but I'm also really proud of us. For keeping going, for figuring out how to be happy again. Can you be sad and happy at the same time?" "Yeah. I think you can. I think that's what growing up means." Milo considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay. Can we go see if your office has the cool chair that spins?" Ethan laughed. "Come on." They walked into Phoenix Tower together. Into the building that had brought Ethan back to life. Into the future neither of them had imagined 6 months ago. Behind them, the afternoon sun caught the restored Art Deco facade, making it gleam like a promise kept. Some things, once broken, could never be what they were. But sometimes, if you were lucky, if you were brave, if someone believed in you when you'd forgotten how to believe in yourself, sometimes broken things could become something new, something beautiful, something worth building.